I'm just finishing up the transition of the forefoot onto the wooden keel and down into the hull. Now, if you remember in the past episode, I was carving the keel, putting that radius in there with my die grinder. And one of the things I discovered was that I had forgotten about these flap wheels that I had that fit on the die grinder. And they're almost exactly the right radius that I'm looking for there. So what happened was that after I finished it up with the die grinder, I then went in with the flap wheel and smoothed it out. After that, I was just able to go in with my sanding disc and finish it up. So I'm getting a really nice transition between the keel and the garboard plank. In addition to the forefoot, I'm going to build and shape the deadwood. So all of that's coming up on this episode of The Art of Boat Building. So what is a forefoot and a deadwood? Well, there are two pieces of wood that finish the keel once the ballast keel is on the boat. Now, forefoot, it's a little bit understandable where that name came from because it's the foot of the boat and it's the fore section. Now, the deadwood, I have absolutely no idea where the term deadwood came from. If any of you know, leave me a comment in the section below. I'd like to know. In the meantime, let's take a look at the plans and I'll show you where they fall on the boat. So over here at the plans, you can see that the yellow part here is the ballast keel. And the orange is the deadwood and the forefoot. And as I had mentioned before, that they are bookends or filler pieces to finish off the keel from the ballast keel to the wooden keel. Now the forefoot will be made out of white oak just as the wooden keel is. The deadwood is made up of two different types of wood. One is a piece of Douglas fir, and the other is a piece of white oak, which is the stern post, which runs along here. And it's a continuation of the transom. To get started with our pattern, we have two reference points. One is that the centerboard trunk runs through the deadwood at this point, so we'll be able to measure from there forward to know exactly where that point falls. And then the other thing we know is that the stern post is directly in line with the transom. The first thing I did was I took a nice straight board and I attached it to the transom. That then gave me the proper angle of the aft end of the deadwood. I attached a piece of plywood, and in this case I reused the pattern from the centerboard trunk. This allowed me to scribe the curvature of the wooden keel. After a little fine-tuning, I got it to fit pretty well. Using measurements off of the plans and off of the ballast keel itself, I was able to establish the angle of the bottom of the deadwood. My scrap plywood wasn't quite big enough, so I needed to hot glue a little section on the front of it. Now that I have my pattern for the deadwood made, I can now determine how many layers of Douglas fir I need to create that. So what I have here, first of all, this is a piece of white oak that will be the stern post. So I'm going to line that up along where that goes and mark that. And then I have a piece of 2x Douglas fir here as a marking gauge. Go down to the two tips and mark that. And then I'm going to move it up and mark it again. And keep doing that. Okay, so now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and just a little bit more. So basically, I need 7 pieces and a little scrap for the top. And the widest part of the keel is 6 inches. So what I'm going to do is purchase some 2x8s, which will give me 7¼ inches of Douglas fir, and then I'll get to cut those out and stair step them up just like it is on the pattern. Now that I've got all of my pieces cut, I can start laying them out here in sort of stair step fashion. And if I lay my template on here, line it up, then I can push these over. I'll need to cut a small little piece for right there. And since the camber of the keel is in here, instead of putting a full board in there where I'd be cutting out most of it to save material, I just cut some small pieces to put on the 2 ends, like that. So now what I'm going to do is to take my pencil and make a few registration marks through here, like so. So I'm going to get some bisqueen and put it down and get ready to do the glue up. Put some epoxy here, and I put some microfiber in here to thicken it somewhat. I'm just going to pour this out, and I've got a trowel here with looks like 1/8 inch markings, so I'm going to use that to spread it. Last clamp on here. It looks like we got really good squeeze out everywhere. So I will let that cure overnight, and then I'll attach these smaller 2 feet on the bottom. Looks like everything glued up really nicely. Once I got the face that lays against the wooden keel shaped, I then need to shape it towards where the ballast keel will fit on here. And in order to do that, I need to cut this at a bit of an angle. So I'll tip my fence and I'll do that here on the bandsaw. For the forefoot, I followed the same procedure of making a pattern, cutting it out, but in this time with white oak. I then epoxied it to the keel and fastened it with bronze screws. Using my power plane, I then faired it to the hull. After some shaping with the die grinder, I then finished it off with a little hand sandpaper. Well, that's a pretty good fit. So this would be the oak stern post that'll be fitted in there later. Now I'm not going to fasten it to the boat at this time. Once I get the boat flipped over and get the ballast keel on there, then I'll fit that in there just to make sure that everything fits perfectly and whether I need to make some minor adjustments. Also, there are several keel bolts that go through here that'll need to go all the way through the wooden keel on the inside, and the way to access that is after the boat is flipped over. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Art of Boat Building.